Here we are. Hello, everyone. It's working. That's fantastic. Right. So, welcome to this webinar, The Definitive Guide to Entering the Search Awards. I've got some amazing colleagues and friends of history to join us today. Folks, can I get you to introduce yourselves very quickly? Could start with Dawn.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Dawn Anderson, SEO consultant based in Manchester, and my boutique consultancy is called Bertie, named after my dog.
That's brilliant. Jim.
I've just noticed we're all wearing glasses. That must make us even more intelligent and intellectual. Hi, everyone. I'm Jim Banks. I'm the CEO of a boutique agency called Spades Media. I'm based in Salisbury in the UK.
Phenomenal. And Neville.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm a communicator, writer and podcaster. I'm based in Somerset in the UK. I've been involved in organizational communication in all various forms, from corporate to employee, for more than 30 years. I also co-host the For Immediate Release podcast that was founded in 2005. And I've been a judge for various award contests for more than 15 years. And looking forward to a good chat today about how to win an award.
Phenomenal. And I'm Dave Edmundson-Bird. I'm from Manchester Met University. I've been a judge for far too long. I think I'm due a gold clock from Don't Panic. And I teach digital marketing here. So brilliant. We're going to have a look through how to do that entry form, which is the thing that's on everyone's mind. And we're going to have a chat about do's and don'ts for different sections, for the different kinds of award. And really, it's about what we're looking for as judges, because rather than trying to guess, we want to read things we want to read. We want to be able to give as many marks as possible to get the really good stuff into the shortlist and eventually winning. So a couple of things to talk about before we start. What makes these awards really important? Well, I mean, one of the really important things is that we are independent judges, so we don't get paid by Don't Panic. I have no idea why we even do it, because there's nothing in it for us really, other than we get to have a chance to see some brilliant work. So all the awards are confidential. Nothing that you put in your entry will go beyond the judging panel. And there are all sorts of regulations and processes behind the whole system. You can see that Don't Panic is actually an accredited, ethical awards business, and it's worth just clicking on some of the stuff on the Don't Panic sites and on the search awards sites about what that means and why that's important. So we're going to look at what makes a great entry into the search awards, but actually, if you're entering any Don't Panic awards, you'll notice that a lot of what we're going to say really applies to any of those sort of awards. So that's a really important thing to think of. Worth just thinking of a couple of basics. I'm going to say it straight away. There's word counts in these. I spend my life looking at work of students where the word count has been superseded. It's really important. All of our judges are volunteers. They've got a very limited time to look at this, and it's really important that we bear that in mind, that we want to get just the right amount of words saying exactly what you want to say. Please don't just send us thousands of words. We've got a certain small amount of time to do the judging, and it's really important that you do the entries right, that you think about the criteria that we're going to be using. There are important little details that we always ask for in each category and in each section of every category. So really that's about what we're going to go for. So folks, should we start with campaign awards, because they're often the ones where there are lots of different kinds of campaign award. So let's talk about some details there. Worth knowing in that word count thing that your entrant name, your client name, the campaign title, they don't count in your word count. So really it's about the entry. So the first section is the objectives and budget section. What do you like to see in there? I mean, who wants to come in first? What is it you're looking to see in there?
I'm going to kick off, but I'm not going to kick off. It's a bit of a bugbear of mine, in that it's no secret that I'm not happy when I see lots and lots of percentages, which for me, I like real numbers. I understand sometimes that it is as much about telling a good story as it is about the numbers themselves. But it just takes away some of the uncertainty when we have like real figures. As David has alluded to, the figures are not going to go beyond. So there's no worry that we're just going to go and tell everybody what your, what's in your analytics, etc. There's no danger of that. But it just helps because percentages are quite manipulatable, whereas numbers are a little bit clearer. And I like to see smart objectives, specific and measurable, and so forth as well.
Yeah, that's really important. I think Neville and Jim, we've talked about these so many times in the past on our various panels about what an objective looks like. Have you got a take on that would help people know how they should be positioning them in this?
Isn't this this is sort of one of the basics, is it not, of your work? You must be able to measure the outcome. And it never ceases to surprise me how many entries I see that don't do that. They list aspirational goals without any measurable indicators. So one thing that I look for always is, are the objectives quantifiable? Are they do they have a methodology whereby the entrant is able to show the success that were connected to the stated goals? And connected to that is where you see impressive results reported in the results panel at the end, which don't bear any relation to the objective set out at the beginning. But so this is your start point. You must do that. Quantifiable metrics and a budget described as per the guidance in the entry form.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I've seen too many objectives that are a bit fluffy and sort of a bit big picturey. And I think for campaign stuff, is it what was it going to achieve? And I think that, and I think everything comes from that line. And I don't know. I think it actually tells me the flavour of the rest of the entry.
That famous saying of, you don't get a second chance to make a first impression, right?
Yeah.
That's the opening gambit of every entry that you look at. Again, what you have to bear in mind, and I think to go back to what you said about don't panic, some of the categories, a lot of people go, the shortlist is there just to get people to go and buy a table to the awards. The reality of it is that in most cases, there are a huge number of entries in every single category, right? So if you're a judge, you have to go through each one and look through them and kind of judge them on the same criteria, right? So, if you have, let's say you have 25 entries to mark in a particular category, right? By the time you get to the 24th, 25th, your eyes are bleeding, right? You've got so much kind of data coming at you. So for me, I always look at the budget and objectives as, this is what I'm going to judge everything else within their entry based upon, right? So what I'm looking for, as Dawn said, clear, smart objectives, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and over a time frame. And sometimes the time frame, it stipulates in the entry what that time frame should be in, and sometimes it may be outside of that, right? And again, I don't have the time to go and look to see, is it within the sort of boundaries of what the time frame we're looking at is, right? I think the things I'm looking for when it comes to budgets, right, is specific numbers, right? How much money did you spend? But more importantly, I'm also want to know how much, what the actual people resource that you've used to kind of deliver the results are, right? Because sometimes, the campaign, it could be a huge entry with big agency, big client, big budgets, right? But if they don't tell us what the makeup of the actual team was, right, we're going to have to just sort of look at it and go, well, I don't really know who was involved in actually delivering the work.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I always look for that budget, and then I like to see it broken down. I like to see how much was spent, particularly on, say, paid media entries. And you go, we had £1 million budget. And you go, yeah, was 990,000 of that the buy? Break those things up, break the tasks up. It doesn't have to be massively complex, but we just want to see it, because we're going to be comparing apples and pears. Lots of
have to be able to normalize things. It's about normalization, isn't it?
Absolutely. So don't be afraid of putting this stuff in, folks, because it's not going to be shared. it's really important we see that. And I know that we always see a line. We can't tell you what it was because of client confidentiality, and that makes it really difficult to judge. So and if you're not going to give us absolute pounds in there, if you said the budget was this for the whole campaign, and it's broken up into these ratios, if you don't want to give us those absolute numbers, but give so we can see it. But the best one is like Dawn says.
Numbers, yeah, but even if you gave quite a narrow range and said the budget was between X and Y, if you didn't want to be absolutely specific, then it's not perfect, but it's a lot better than saying, well, we increase things like by 30%. Well, if you're going from like whatever, 10 to 13, it's not really very impressive, is it? So.
Absolutely.
I mean, the actual entry form guidance is quite straightforward. It's easy to follow, where it tells you quite clearly if you can't state a budget because of client confidentiality, for instance, you should be able to give an indicator of the financial band, and you can break down the split, media, staff costs, etc. As it says on the entry in percentages. That would be sufficient, but not saying anything really dooms you from that point onwards, I would say.
I think agree.
The other thing I would say is quite often I look at the objectives, and it almost looks like they've been written after the event, right? So the numbers are so precise in terms of the objectives. You go, I think you kind of put those in to just show that you actually achieved them when you look at the results, right? So
you can tell, can't you? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So that's fantastic. So that's I think it's a really straightforward section. But it sets that flavour up, and it lets us know how careful this has been put together in terms of the entry, but the campaign as well, because we know that there was a purpose to it. So that's something for them to think about. Which leads us. The
last thing I would say on that point, though, Dave, is that a lot of entrants seem to think that putting in superlatives into the actual objectives and everything else. Like, again, it's important. Every single word it goes towards your word count, right? So you saying we think this was brilliant and our team was brilliant, right? Fantastic if you believe that, right? But at the end of the day, judges are, as Dave said, impartial. We're there to kind of judge all of the entries on the kind of criteria and the merit of the actual entry, and let us be the judges of whether it's brilliant and everything else.
Yeah, I would say with that, don't use sales and marketing talk, because we're all from this game. Speak clearly.
Yeah. We don't need it selling to us other than by the facts, by the campaign, by the outcome, etc. You don't need to use hyperbole to kind of win us over. That doesn't really work. And I just circle really quickly back to the word count thing. I think it's just about making sure that everybody's competing on a level playing field as well. So, as I said, I think the main spearhead of the search awards is the objectivity. If something's got double the word count, then you can't even say that it's on the same level playing field.
Absolutely. Which leads us to that next section, which is about target audience. What do you want to read in that? How do you want people to express their target audience? I guess it's different for different kinds of campaign, but what do you say? Oh, that's a really clear one. What does that look like?
I like to see a persona.
Yeah.
Not unbelievably detailed, but I don't want to see a big, and everybody between the ages of 18 and 60. That's just too broad. Specific, if possible. A persona for me always stands out really well. It means that they've really thought about who they're trying to target, the intent of the audience and so forth. So yeah, that's what I like to say.
That makes sense. I think so. I think the point you made there, Dawn's a good one about my audience is between 18 and 64. I mean, it's stuff like that. If it's a global campaign you ran, say so. If it's in more than one country, say who they are. I think it comes down to being clear, and what often is in my mind when I look at these is, what did you tell your client if you're an agency? How did you describe the audience to your client? Surely you would have gone into quite considerable detail when you're doing this, in which case use that. Summarize it for the word count if you need to, but it needs to be clear enough so that there's no doubt you do understand as a judge who they were trying to reach. And often that's difficult to do. And often there's a blur between target audience and strategy, missing links between the two. Strategy is often, in my experience of this, is too brief. One of my common comments to people is more detail would have helped you. So, detailed explainers, clarity of your audience and indeed your strategy. And again, the guidance in the entry form is concise, but it's clear, and there's your indicator.
Absolutely. And on that strategy word, what if you wanted to say to someone, this is what I expect a strategy to look like in this entry, what sort of angle would we put on that? Because I sometimes see stuff and don't think that's really tactical and operational.
Yeah. I think I've come from a paid media background, so quite often I'll look at some of the entries, and what they've included as their strategy is, we ran a performance max campaign, and it's like, well, that's not really kind of a strategy per se. That's more of, as you say, tactical and everything else. And even there, it's kind of like you're leaning on the technology of Google rather than the actual execution of your campaigns.
I was going to say, I think this is actually where the big picture comes into it. The broad approach. What were we looking to achieve overall, etc., rather than pinning it down to all the different actions and tactics that we took. So, what was the overall objective, big picture objective, not the specific measurable stuff, and how were we going to go about it, but without going into all the details. So, quite broad language. Overall, I would say in the section.
Fantastic. So making that leap from strategy, we go to that section around implementation and creativity. And I sometimes find this quite frustrating. I think there's a kind of view that there's a lot of practice that people will find common everywhere. Yeah, you will all do the same thing. And I sometimes go, yeah, but that's great. But in your implementation and your creativity, which bit was really unique to you as a business, or what was new on this occasion? What was different? What makes this better than any of the other entries? So what do you think? What sort of examples have you seen of, or what would you like to see when someone's talking about implementation and creativity?
It's a good one, David. To me, this is after objectives and budget, the singular most important element. This is the opportunity to tell your story, and it's the only section in an entry where it says, please include screenshots or images. I think the ones I've seen recently are those that have done that on every section in the entry form, not just this. And they're clearly people who understand that they're trying to tell a story here, and the visuals will support the narrative that they do. So the idea of this is precisely to do that. Tell your story that helps the judge at the moment of judging visualize it. So do not just put links to a document or a supplementary file or a supporting file or whatever it is. And don't forget, they're not part of your entry. The key word there is supportive, right? So it is to your advantage to tell your story. This is your opportunity to do that in a conversational way. That is storytelling. So that the judge is left. And from my experience, the highest scoring entries for me are the ones that do exactly that here, amongst other things, of course. That I feel when I've read this section, I understand the story, and it's left me with some kind of emotional reaction. Wow, that was amazing, or something like that. And they are few and far between, but when you come across them, you're feeling already warm and nice and think, wow, these guys have got something going for them here. And that will influence how you look at the rest of the entry. So Absolutely. This to me is the golden opportunity to tell your story, pay attention to the guidance and the form, and include your visuals here. And it says on it, it's a mandatory thing. If you don't include any, it will affect your score on this.
Particularly around the creativity thing. I think that
it's meant to demonstrate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to be surprised by what I find in there. I want to be like, oh, this is interesting. This is a really new and innovative approach. This is like the cutting edge of our industry. But this at the same time aligns maybe cross-channel, or everything's tied up really well. Yeah, something that for me, something this is an opportunity to stand out. As Neville said, this is the heart of the entry in my view.
And I think it's
I think,
often. Go on, Neville.
Yeah. No, just sorry. So just a point to kind of spur, you prompted a thought there, Dawn. That another thing I notice is when people give you links, which they sometimes do, and they don't have to all be at the end. If it's part of the narrative, the flow is natural, that it means you can click it and then see it if you want to. Are the ones who rely on a link without any explainer of what you meant to look at when you get to that link, particularly if it's a video. So these are things that you don't assume that a judge will do that, have time to do that, and is willing to try and figure out what it is you want him or her to look at. So this is all part of the thinking it through in terms of the effectiveness of what you're trying to communicate here. And again, the guidance in the form gives you an idea. So, do that, not just a link.
Absolutely.
And I would probably just add in terms of the implementation and creativity again, specifically on paid search. You're absolutely right, Dave, to call out the actual visualization of the creative that was used. So for me, it's like I want to see if it's a paid search ad, show me the Google ads, show me the kind of YouTube videos you used. Right, that's probably one of those examples where I would actually click through to see what the actual video does in relation to both the objectives and also the budget, right? So for me, I can kind of like some information out to help sort of satisfy me that there's some cohesion and the cascading process between this is how much money we had, this is the people we had, this is what we said we were going to set out to, who we were targeting, and this is the actual delivery of that actual the campaign in terms of pulling it all together. Right. And also from there, you never expect things to be smooth sailing. So like there'll be some deviations of things that need to be done to kind of make sure that you deliver the end results.
So we've talked about getting people to talk about implementation and creativity, thinking about being different and innovative, which leads us to one of the more interesting sections and one of the ones I really like to look at, which is the challenges faced section. And I wondered if you could, I want to start this sort of a bit counterintuitively. What should people not put in there?
The challenges that we all face, because everybody has very similar challenges. During COVID, every agency faced challenges with staff having to be furloughed and so on and so forth. And most businesses, a lot of businesses had to be closed down. They had to go online, etc. So whilst it was an opportunity, it was a common one. So I think challenges need to be something that is be exception to the rule, I would say.
Yeah, something that no other one in your environment is facing. So I had an example of one, which is there was and this is quite a while back now. The agency's premises burned down. Nobody else's was burning down at the time, and it was how they got round the fact that they had to be very, very mobile. And suddenly, this is pre-lockdown, so people weren't in that space. And it was how they got around that really made me think, well, these are really good results if you haven't got a premises or kit. So that stood out for me.
Quite often it could be people expect that they need to massively overachieve on the results that they have, and sometimes the challenges could mean that you don't actually hit the objectives and budgets that you had at the beginning, right? So again, it could be. Again, like Google might turn around and say, we're not taking any ads from financial services, right? So you go, well, what do we need to do now to get around that, right? So you need to be nimble, think on your feet, and how you can kind of change the dynamic and make sure that you continue to deliver the results.
I think the key word is unique, right? Yes. Some of my comments I make in the constructive bit on the scoring sheet talks about, these are good, what you've explained, but you haven't really explained what's unique about them. So rather than say this is general, is give it a more positive spin, that this would have been great. It would have been fabulous if you had explained how unique they were. I guess in some cases, and this may be a general thing, that it could be hard for some people to judge themselves what's unique about their challenge, because we see so many of them that clearly are not unique. So maybe they need to get fresh eyes looking at their entry before they send it in, I think might help in that case. But unique is the word people need to pay attention to here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or detailed as well. I think one of the common things we do see is like sometimes communication challenges with clients or pushback within large organizations for dev, etc. I think these are common challenges, but how you deal with them, you can make a unique argument about how you actually dealt with it. So turn the common challenge into something that you did that was unique almost, if you like. I think
Absolutely.
that's acceptable.
Fantastic. And now we come to the section on results and evaluation. And I think this feeds back to the very, very first section, doesn't it?
Yep.
Who wants to tell me what they want to see first in that box?
Yes, so I would probably say I'm looking for again, very specific results that can be sort of evaluated against what the budget was. So sometimes those two kind of go together. So if there's no information about the budget, then it's very difficult to know whether the results are good or bad, right? So for me, it's like if that's where sometimes the scores on one section can impact the scores on another just by the omission of information that's going to be really important. I also think sometimes that's where people try and throw in screenshots of, like Google Analytics or what have you, and it's so difficult to see, right, in the actual PDF or Word document, right? So for me, that's probably one of those situations where if you were going to suggest to use supplementary information or supporting documentation, that's where you can put those sorts of screenshots on a PDF that people can then sort of look at in more detail, right? So, if it's very busy, right, you're supporting documentation, then I would probably recommend that's where you could put that on a sort of separate documentation to actually help support the information that's on there.
That's a good one, Jim. I'm just thinking to myself of something. A couple I saw recently were with charts or tables, but you couldn't read any of it. The printer's so small in the PDF, and of course it doesn't amplify. Or if it does, it's blurred. But the point is that you think it through a bit. What would have worked in one case I'm thinking of is maybe a bar chart showing this was the goal and this is the achievement. I mean, that would have been very helpful. But for me, what I look for more than anything when I first look at this section is, does the outcomes they're reporting match the objectives at the first section? And what helps me as a judge, and this is few and far between I see this, but I welcome it when it happens, is someone writing the section, reporting the results, lists this was the goal, this was the outcome we achieved, and on the same page. So I don't have to scroll back through to see what they were at the beginning. And that's handy. And there's not a specific ask to do that. That to me is like common sense when you're preparing your entry, that you're doing this. The other thing I then look for is the evaluation. I don't want to see just reporting of the results. I want the insights from the entrant in their evaluation of those results. And typically, I'd love to see some honesty more than I do see. I'm not saying they're not honest, they are, but more, it'd be nice to see here and there, this was disappointing even though it exceeded the goal. We were actually expecting it to be even better than that. I'd like to see that kind of honest comment. So that tells me a human is clearly behind the scenes here and writing this thing and telling the story. But it is, I guess, the nature of people generally that you'll really highlight your successes here. And this often comes across where there is a disconnect between what the objective said at the outcome, at the outset of the entry. And that's a shame, because you go, hang on a minute, this doesn't quite fit with what, with what they said or didn't say at the very beginning. And the final one for me is like where there is a serious gap because of gaps in, for instance, budget explanation, target audience, strategy aren't clear, and they report amazing results. That makes it very difficult to truly judge the success of what they're claiming.
Mm.
I would add to that just a couple of points. Again, circling back to the percentages thing, I don't really want to say, look, we had like an uplift of like 10%, 15%, whatever, if we don't have clear figures in the first place. So again, impossible figures. But the other one is I do sometimes see that people in the entries claim results for other channels. So if you've got like a cross-channel campaign, they're trying to claim that, the uplift was all to do with SEO when really it's just one of several campaigns that were implemented together. So I think it's important to like at least give a nod to the fact that there was lots of other things going on at the same time, and where possible, try to separate the results that you achieved as your specific channel from the broader results.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I think that's absolutely critical.
And also, Dave, I think quite often you'll see an entry that's been submitted on behalf of a client by an agency, and they're comparing themselves to the previous agency, the agency that got booted out, right? And you would think, well, if they didn't overachieve against those, then that would question why they actually got appointed to the business to begin with, right? So, so in some respects, the objectives shouldn't really be to do better than the previous kind of agency that was there, right? So.
Yeah, I think that's critical. The other thing I quite like to see is and it's a thing that sometimes distinguishes results from everyone else's results. Is there an emergent result that perhaps you hadn't anticipated? Maybe something that was a delight, like not only did this happen, but this as well. And sometimes that's not just numbers; there can be sort of a qualitative element to them. So I do like to see that, particularly in the evaluation, that you then think, well, that's happened because we did this, and that's something for us to take forward and maybe use again. Maybe it's connected to your creativity and implementation. Maybe you rethought your audience or something like that, and as a result, something that you hadn't anticipated with your clients is there. The one thing I don't want to see is we smashed it out of the park. And that's always no. Don't.
Without telling us how big the park was.
Yeah,
it was a huge park, and we smashed it out of that one.
Now, down to the last section, which can be quite contentious. Why your campaign should win? What do we want to see in there? What do we keep seeing in there? And yeah,
I've always kind of said, like, I've always likened this to being a little bit like if you have a social media post that goes out, right, and it doesn't get, say, 50 likes or comments or what have you from people internally, so people that work for your company, if they don't like it or comment on it or share it, why on earth would anyone else do it, right? And in some respects, this, why do you think you should win, right, is in that same sort of boat, right? It's not like, I think we should win because we're amazing people, right? It needs to be, we had challenges, we had this, we had that. And in spite of all of those things, we still were able to kind of deliver work that was, the client was blown away by. Here's a testimonial from the client, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Those are the sort of things I think do well, right? I think it's quite often, again, maybe it's people have submitted loads of entries to loads of categories, and by then they've lost the will to live. They just write anything, right? And equally, it carries the same amount of weight. The point score in that is exactly the same as every other category in there. So don't sort of skimp on that and say, oh, I can just put whatever. It won't really matter, right? Because a good entry with good reasons why they should win, right, can be the difference between you being on the short list or winning the category outright just by having it.
I think it's also it's a very good point, Jim. For me, I think I would add to that, if an entrant has written a glowing self-testimonial, let's say, and there's nothing wrong with that if it tells the right story, but it doesn't quite gel with the rest of the entry, where it's missing bits or it didn't explain too well, and you look at these scores, you think there's lots of 3s and 4s there, very few 7s, 8s, and 9s. So I'd question that. And that then comes, I think, back to the overall narrative quality and storytelling in the entry as a whole. So you've got this story that started with objectives and budget. went through who's the audience and the strategy, and then you looked at the implementation creativity, here are some challenges and so forth, and then you looked at all the results and the evaluation. And then you come to, okay, this is why we should win this category. That flow has got to be absolutely connected all the way. And I think your point, I agree with you that what I tend to look at in very positive ways is this section, which in a sense praises the client, as opposed to says we're amazing because we did this, although I don't object to that either. But the ones that do well are the ones who say, well, you know, our client enabled us to achieve this because they were amazing and they got a great product or service and they helped us. We worked together to achieve all these things. That works. But the whole thing has got to support the statements in that, in my eyes. So, and unfortunately, too many don't do that. Too many are we're amazing and there's nothing to back that statement up in the rest of the entry. So the whole thing, you need to look at the whole entry in a holistic way as a whole, that everything leads up to that statement at the end. And your point about it's the same number of points as all the other sections. Yep, true. Don't skimp on it. And whatever you do, please don't just copy and paste from some brochure. That's I see that a lot. I'm sure you do as well. You look at the text thing, this looks like it's come out of a slide presentation or something. Talk in a human way. Tell your story. This is another aspect of your story. And if you do all those things, you'll get perfect scores.
Yeah.
Don't see that too often.
Sorry, David. It's all right.
Like I say, the best one I saw was the client that insisted on writing why the campaign should win, because they said, "I'll tell you why this agency should win."
Brilliant, excellent.
And it was just like you know, if because you were going to bring them to the night anyway. I mean, they are so proud of the work you did. They say they should win because we're about to double the amount of work we give them. It's that is the best I ever saw.
Superb.
What I would say is really important is in this section, which is circling back to the whole objectivity of judges, I think this is the section in which the actual entrant has to be objective about their entry. And look back through it, look at what they've said, look at where the data has taken them from start to finish, and so really why they think that should stand out to us as judges. So.
Nothing's ever a straight line, right? I mean, if it goes in a straight line, then you've done... Like you haven't really set the objectives challenging enough in order for them to achieve them, right? So there needs to be those deviations and things go wrong and you kind of pivot and change and what have you. That's the way of the world, right? I mean, we're all kind of having to kind of deal with change. I mean, that's the only thing that's guaranteed, right? In the 27 years I've been doing digital marketing, that's the only thing I've known for sure is change, right? It's always going to be change.
Absolutely. Phenomenal. Right. I'm conscious of the time, so I want us to move on. I'm going to move us to a slightly different category type now, which is section D about innovation, software and products. And I'm always a bit surprised about this, that companies are a bit reluctant to enter it because they think, oh, it'll be a big software provider. But we're living in an age now when agencies can start building their own innovations, their own software, their own products. And I'm keen to start seeing look, we've invented this. But as people who've judged this in the past, there are, again, 5 sections. What do you want to see in the overview?
Yeah, that's quite a tough one. I mean, quite often the entries for this category or these categories are well-known companies that we've all, used the tools for a while, right? And what I'm looking for is I'm looking for the evolution, right? So again, the feature set has to change, right? So if you looked at last year's entry versus this year's, right? What have you done to make it better this year, right? Even if it's, like there's 5 new features that you've added, right? Because some of the judges, like us, will have done multiple years of doing this, right? Some of the judges will be first timers and they don't know anything about you at all, right? Some judges don't use tools that may exist, and others will use them kind of a lot, right? So you'll tend to find that quite often when we get to the actual judging, choosing the winner, right? There's lots of contention because different people use different tools, and they're sort of they talk about the features that matter to them, right? So what I'm looking for in terms of the innovation is I'm really looking for what have you done that is different and new and exciting since last year, or to kind of compensate for the changes in the ecosystem.
Absolutely. I like to see the value that this gives to people, because I think people just say it does this, it does this. Yeah, but what do you give to your users? What is it that they get from it that they can't get from someone else's? I really like to see the value proposition really laid out there, rather than just telling me how fast it goes, or how many how many revolutions a minute it does. It's no one wants that bit there. The budget bit's quite important, and I think that allows us to understand people who are a small outfit making a little thing versus a very big organization with a very, very big product. Because again, we're often comparing apples and pears. So we need to understand the inputs from the business financially and resource wise, as well as if it's being sold, how much is it sold for, and what's the relationship between that. I mean, there are so many tiny little cheap things that are tremendously valuable to people, and there are very expensive products. I'm not going to name them here. But you might feel that pound for pound they might be less valuable. So I think it's to encourage people to show that bangs for bucks thing.
Yeah, that normalization process is very, very important, as you say. I think that's just allows, like you said, the level playing field. But for me, just circling back to that previous point around what I'd like to see in the overview is the identification of a gap that they've spotted where their customers need something. There's a new need in the market, and they have then gone on to produce something to bridge that gap. Really, something that stands out to me.
Absolutely, and I think that feeds to that little section about unique selling points. I've seen entries where I've looked at 4 or 5 things, like I can't really tell what makes this special. Why is yours the only one that does it? Those are really important.
I think also for me, the overriding thing, I suppose, would be to tell your story in simple terms. Don't assume that the judge is technically adept or expert on your particular area. And I see that in some areas quite clearly. Don't assume that. So imagine, rule of thumb here, right? How would you explain this to your grandma? Or your mother even. I mean, use that approach. I mean, not to the ridiculous simplicity, but the kind of buzzwords and phrases you might be commonly used to describing your industry, your product, or whatever it is. Don't do that in an entry for an award. So again, back to the basics here. What's your role here? Is to present your entry in a way that makes it dead easy for the judge to give you high scores. That's all you're trying to do here. Not a technical white paper. It's an award entry. That's different.
And I think the budget's also, a lot of people just assume that they need to know how much it costs to buy the product or service, right? So, and we could go to a price page to kind of know what that is, right? That's more about, we've got 500 engineers, we've got, this amount of money that we spent in the last 12 months on the tool, right? We came out with these 50 new features and everything else. And that's when the USPs and features can really kind of come to play. Right, we built this feature because most of our customers were saying they had a problem with this, this, and this, so we built this tool for them to kind of do that.
Yeah, absolutely. On the key metrics of an innovation or a piece of software or a product, I quite like to see a sort of where this has come from. There's almost a storytelling bit to this, but I want to know what has made this successful. What have you measured to go, this is brilliant, because it's got to stand out. So what is the thing that that you use to go, this is excellent, this is the proof, here we are, this is how we measure success? I really like to see that there, and we as judges like to see the proof of that. So prove to us what you're saying, and that's that opportunity to put something in supporting documentation. I don't know what that might. It depends on what it is. It might be sales. What else might it be? That proof.
Speed of uptake, for instance. Speed of uptake is an indication that you've generated an excitement within the industry. Notwithstanding, obviously, those with bigger marketing budgets can get bigger uptake than small. But we only have to look at some of the small agencies that are building really interesting tools that are picked up really, really quickly just by them sharing it on
Yeah.
LinkedIn, you know,
Yeah.
because they've found something that is useful in this really quickly evolving landscape. I know I sound like ChatGPT there.
Let's delve deeper.
Yeah.
I think as well, given the world we're in, where people are building a lot of their own stuff, and I think we're going to see more entries like that this year rather than necessarily just the commercial ones. I want to see that story, and in a way that leads to that final section. You know, why should this win? You know, what are the things in that? Why should the innovation software product you've entered here? Why should this win this category? I think that story there might be really important. You know, you built something, you don't necessarily sell it for cash, but is everyone in your business now using it? Have you put it into all your clients? Has it made a massive difference to some of the information that might be in another entry for a campaign, for example? I want to see that connectedness, just because I think we're going to start to see lots of different entries like that. Is there anything else you would want to see in that? Why should your innovation win?
I think you're back to Jim's points before. Let's get the client to write that section. If you've delivered software to another organization, they're using it, or it was part of something else you did, that there's no kind of like line item showing how much this is worth. That doesn't matter. What did the user think of it? I mean, the
software costs £2,000 a year to buy.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? We saved 500 hours of manpower,
That's
right?
it.
Which, you know, at £50 an hour, £100 an hour, that saved us £50,000 in labor costs for £2,000, right? So there's a real tangible, but it's also, it helps solve I think a lot of the tools that exist now, they were built because they helped sort of scratch the itch of people that were having a particular problem. They couldn't fix it, so they built something to kind of help them fix it, and then they made it available to other people to buy, right? So
fantastic. Okay, I hope we're going to see some really interesting, some interesting vibe-coded stuff. I'm really looking forward to seeing these ones this year. I think there are going to be a lot of agency-based ones where people have built something for themselves to keep the big boys on their toes. So that one is one I'm looking forward to. And I want to look at the section on agency and team awards. And again, this is quite a different flavour of entry. Rather than campaigns, we're now looking at organizations. So again, the usual stuff. I find people get into this and it almost starts getting very verbose and flowery and a bit, and I want to see something really, really tight and specific here. So in the section on agency and team objectives, what are the objectives we're looking for there? How do they differ from, say, campaign ones?
I like to see things around retention, for instance, churn of bodies, if you like.
In terms of staff or for customers?
In terms of, well, both really, both. Because for me, retention is a good sign of staff happiness to some extent, client happiness, etc. So retention's a good one that really matters to me. Yeah.
I think the thing is, like, quite often you'll see, so in the agency categories, you have typically small and large, right? And then specialism, so it could be e-commerce or finance or SEO or PPC or what have you, right? And sometimes agencies are multifaceted. So quite often they'll kind of include, they've got 500 people, but they might only have 3 people that do PPC, right? In which case, that's the sort of stuff that I think you need to include in there. I think, when you look at things like large agencies, again, you would expect a lot of the things that people put in as innovation would just be like table stakes for a large agency, right? So, again, things like training and stuff like that. It's like, what do you do to kind of encourage people to have a career path within your agency? We've got people that have been here for 7 years and they've had 4 promotions and, and everything else. It's about how you can manage the resource that you have to kind of do good work for clients, right? But not sort of stretch people too much. But equally, I think it's also, what are you doing in the community at large, right? Are you doing, like webinars or seminars or, blogs or what have you? Just stuff that's different to make it look like you're an agency that people would want to go to work for, right? And I think there's no, I think there's no reason why when you look at some of the agencies that started off as small agencies in search categories, they grew to big agencies and people just wanted to go and work for them, right? So because every time you look at the entry, go, that looks like an agency I'd love to go and work at, right? That's the sort of thing I'm looking for.
Absolutely.
I think I'd add to that, just thinking about the Global Agency Awards that I judged recently, that looked at, as one that struck me, let's say, without mentioning anyone's names, where they itemized their agency and team objectives in 4 categories, which I thought was a really good split to give you that holistic picture of this agency. It was financial performance, market recognition, client result satisfaction, and employee satisfaction. You've covered it all there, and you don't have to write essays on this, and they have not. They've done concise but well thought through narratives describing all of these things, that with some hard numbers that would say this is how we judge whether this worked for us or not. And not many had done it the way they had done, but others were good too. But this one struck me in particular because for me it was memorable what they wrote. I could recall quite easily what their goals were. And that you need that full picture, in my view, to make a judgment on an agency or a team. And this was not a big mega agency. This was I describe it as a mid-sized agency. So that's important. They were able to explain that well in the following sections. So again, they told a very compelling story.
I think those are probably the dream subtitles in that section.
Yeah.
I'd really like to see that, and I think that's a great piece of advice to hand out on that one. In this, we're always looking for, in the section on recent work examples, I wondered if you had a view about what we should be seeing in there compared to what's going to be, say, an entry for a campaign.
That's a good question, actually, Dave.
Yeah.
Is this not really similar to a campaign entry? It's sort of like a mini campaign in a sense, isn't it?
Yeah.
That they are, so they would be setting out similar goals and achievements, not necessarily with all the detail of target audience and stuff like that, but it would be similar, I would say.
Yeah. I have a view, but that's why we have several people on a panel, so that all views are kind of that. I would be surprised to see an agency entry with recent work examples, and then not one of those examples is an entry into one of the categories. I'd be really surprised that would be the case. But I also accept that not every example of work necessarily fits in with the actual awards themselves. So particularly for agencies that have quite a diverse portfolio, or maybe there's it's incomplete work, or it's not there yet, something like that. I'm really interested to see that you're strong enough to put an entry in. It needs to be in here, but then the other stuff that supports it, so we understand the bigger picture of that. Other opinions are available on what I've just said, by the way. So it's just something I'm always surprised by an entry here where, well, why haven't you entered the rest of the awards? If you're that good.
I wonder whether sometimes there are, in recent work examples, items that they couldn't necessarily get a sign off to give enough detail to justify an entry, if that makes sense. But so they can give a nod to it and say, we achieved this very, very top level, massively successful, but maybe they've not been able to get a form of approval from the client.
And that innovation, that's quite often where I'm looking for the tool didn't exist, so we built it, right? Those are the sorts of things that I think really sort of stand out to me, right? It's the, like if they've done something because they had an itch, they couldn't kind of get a suitable kind of solution for them, so they built it themselves, right? Whether it's vibe coded or what have you, they kind of realized that they needed to kind of do that. And again, when it comes to standout results, sometimes the results could be we achieved this, but we achieved it with the background of the building burnt to the ground, and we had to kind of do this or what have you. I mean, so many different things.
Yeah, I think that's really, really important, which then leads to that next section, details of any recent achievements. And again, there are some divided views about what should be in here and what shouldn't be in here. What don't you want to see?
I can tell you what I do want to see. I'm not sure about what I don't want to see.
I'll go with I don't want to see we've won 5 other awards for, whatever, right? That, like, in some respects, it's sort of like you've got to do this as a standalone, right? You're submitting your agency for this particular category, this particular year, not we've won it 25 times in the past, right?
Yeah.
You're still going to be judged based upon the kind of criteria for this year based on the time period that it's in question.
You could include that in a kind of round robin, if you like. On again, I'm thinking of one entry particularly who did this under the heading commercial performance. They talked about the revenue target they had set for the year. That was an increase over the previous year and all that. They won industry awards. They listed how many without going into any detail whatsoever. And the fact that their retention, employee retention numbers were extremely high. And they gave in a sense, evaluatory comments about why that was in 3 short paragraphs. And they had other things in this particular section, but that's valid to me because that's under that broad heading of their overall performance. So I think that's quite good doing it that way. I agree with you though, Jim. I wouldn't want to see all they said here was the awards and going into detail about them and nothing else.
And I like that point, actually, that for me, it's about ensuring that in that section, you don't just touch one point. You bring in, well, what did we achieve that was to do with improving the staff, improving the staff's abilities, or what did we do to contribute to the community, etc. So it's a summarization of not just commercial aspects or awards, but people aspects.
Yeah, I think I like to see something that was hard, something difficult to achieve there. Maybe it's a particular accreditation which requires a considerable effort. I'm going down the boring route here. Did you achieve an ISO accreditation for something which is critical for one of your clients, which would have involved some serious effort?
I like seeing agencies that put individual people within the organization on pedestals to say this person went way above and beyond their kind of job title, right, and their job scope and everything else, right? They really kind of push the envelope.
Yeah, I saw one agency putting the fact that their digital marketing apprentice had won the Apprenticeship of the Year award, and because that is a hell of a thing when you're going against several tens of thousands of other apprentices. And I they really put that person up there as a figurehead for their culture of professional development. What I don't want to see is that you won Agency of the Year award somewhere else. You're not winning an award because you won the same one in a different, a different awards at all. And the challenges one, this is our organisational challenges. It's got a connection to that campaigns one, but it's a bit broader, isn't it?
Yeah. Again, I think it's important that we tick off and say, it needs to be something that makes them stand out as having had exceptional challenges versus every other agency.
And unique.
Quite often, like most people that go and join an agency are aspirational. They want to kind of move on, right? So quite often you'll find that people go and join an agency that has great training. They get training for 6 months and then they leave and go somewhere else, right? And it's sort of, but again, I think some agencies, they kind of, they don't want people to leave, right? But at the end of the day, if that's what you're known for, it's a good place to go to start your career, right? Then I think a lot of people will go and join that agency because of the fact that they develop people sufficiently to be able to go on and get great jobs with other agencies, right? So,
absolutely. And then that leads us neatly to the very last one. Again, the stand-up piece. Why your agency should win. What do you like to read there?
Again, roundedness. I think the roundedness really, really matters. The summarization of the cultural advancements, the financial advancements, the progress made, something that makes them stand out as well. Exception.
Yeah. the entry form guidance would guide you, where it talks about what makes you unique, what gives you the competitive edge. Simple questions. If you can answer those questions, then you've got the possibility of writing a good section here.
But I like Dawn's point there about culture, right? I think for me, like
Yeah.
in an agency ecosystem, I think the culture is what really sort of stands out. It's like, because ultimately, if you have great culture and a great ethos and you've got great clients and good retention, right, you probably don't even need to go and do any advertising for, recruitment, right? You can get people who will be beating down your door because they want to come and join you because they know that's going to be an agency they want to work for. So I think in some respects, that's what makes you stand out is we spend zero money on recruitment because everyone wants to join us.
And I saw a really good piece that an agency had done and employed an external body to come and do a cultural audit to find out, a bit of a 360 thing. And they were able to present this absolute objective evidence that they were one of the best agencies in the world because the cultural audit had proved it. So they had that there. We've done this. I hadn't heard of anyone else doing it, so it was really, really interesting to read. Cue everyone now having thousands of these, but it's the proof. It's the proof you're the best agency. If your staff say it, and they're saying it independently without any kind of duress being used. So absolutely wonderful. I'm quite conscious of the time. We want to open up for questions. So, folks, if you've got some questions you want to ask, please drop them in the chat. We've got one from Lee, and I'll have a listen to this one. If an agency runs an evergreen campaign, can we add in the entire campaign into the entry, or how do we break down the work to fit the date range while also giving a nod to the work done long term? Or should the entry just stick to the date range provided? What would your advice be?
You're muted, Dawn.
Sorry. I would endeavour to show the uplift within the defined period, whilst also saying that this is an always on campaign. However, this is how we've progressed, and what did you do to actually make that evergreen campaign better during that period?
Yeah.
You can always improve on everything. Yeah. So I would certainly try and, because otherwise you could just be going up and up and up with an evergreen piece, just to give an example, but it doesn't show that you've improved on anything.
That makes sense. I think the not mentioning it's part of an evergreen campaign would not be the right way to do this. But I agree with Dawn that you'd contextualize it within the framework of the long-term ongoing campaign. And you should quite easily be able, I would imagine, to, again, depending on what it is, of course, to create something that fits the date range. And
because quite often people look at an e-commerce campaign and they'll cherry pick the 3 months that includes Black Friday, Cyber Monday, Christmas as the measurement for whatever the kind of success is driven by, right? But I think it's you isolate the date range that is included in the window that is expected, but also call out the fact that it's an ongoing kind of perpetual thing.
Yeah, I mean, you could do that even if there was nothing mega amazing about the work that you did. It could be that it's a continuity of good work you've been doing, and it happened to be within that window, and it happened to include these things that worked well. So yeah, that shouldn't be too difficult to do, I would say.
Yeah, comparative as well. Compare a year on year with the same period, for instance.
Yeah. I would think with an entry like this that the reason to put the entry in this year is because you did something different to really go to get some kind of uplift that makes this impressive.
Yeah, because I think that's the main point as well. I think it's really key to say that for me, award winning has to stand out. Yeah, it can't be average. It has to stand out.
Okay, we've got some questions in our Q&A bit. Unfortunately, they're all anonymous. So one is, if we have won other awards, can we mention that in our achievement section, or is it a bit crass? I think we might have covered that.
I think so.
I'm tempted to say no. That doesn't mean you mustn't. It's just that be conscious that there might be better achievements to think of. Here's a procedural one. Does it matter if I do a Word doc entry or a PDF entry? And the answer is no, it's either. I will say this, though. Use the form. Do the form that's there. Don't produce something in your organizational layout document. I've seen some beautiful things, but I hate judging stuff that isn't in a format. We've got to judge dozens and dozens of these. We just need the document as is. So please don't mess about with it in any way, shape, or form, and don't produce some shiny brochure.
I think one year I saw a 154-page PDF document as the entry, and I'm like, sorry, it would take me 3 weeks to read that.
I had a case in a recent thing I was doing a month or so back, where someone had just literally pasted unformatted text into a Word document that came in at 20-odd pages. Most of which were blanks, because there's no formatting, and it was utter nightmare. No bolds, no italics, no bullet points, nothing, just unformatted text. Don't do that.
I've seen very fancy PowerPoint type slides, obviously turned into PDFs, but without the sections that we have as standard, absolute nightmare trying to find actually the parts that fit with what we're trying to judge.
Make it easy for us to mark.
When you go back to the beginning, I mean, we talked about some of the judges, like all of us have been doing this for a long time. Yeah. There's a lot of judges that maybe this is the first time they're doing it. So they may well go and look at a PDF and hunt the information out. But I think most experienced judges just know not to go and kind of go down the rabbit hole. It's just pointless. So for me, it's like if I look at typically budget, why you think you should win, right? Look to see broad speaking, how many words I think there might be. If it's like more than 1,000, usually I'm like, okay, well, I think we'll just I'm scoring it mentally before I've even kind of looked through. I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time going through that because I know that they haven't read the criteria well enough to be able to kind of, meet what needs to be done.
And there's another one here, and I think it would help us with a sort of a nice definitive answer. If a client doesn't sign off using actual numbers, is percentages okay to use in this circumstance? And I think you've got a point of view here, Dawn.
Yeah, I think it's just it makes it harder to be as clear with where the progress was made, etc. I think Neville made a good point that really, if we can't say, well, it was within this range, for instance. I would be speaking to the client and say, look, this is confidential, it's going no further, and even if they don't give all of the numbers, just give us some indication so we can use the measurement here.
I mean, all judges sign an NDA. Right? The Don't Panic are under kind of like strict criteria as far as the rules and regulations that they're going to abide by. So, again, I think I think the point is, if they put only percentages, then some judges will mark them harshly on the basis of that, right? So you may still win, but it's going to be a little bit more difficult to do that. Right? So I'm not saying don't do it, but I would definitely say if you can kind of include some sort of range, include the range.
Well, it's basically then follow the guidance in the entry form, because it gives you the option to do that quite clearly. If you can't break down the budget, or unspoken, if the only way you can break down the budget is in percentages, don't do that. Do the range. It gives you that option. And if you do the range, you won't suffer a penalty in the judging, because it's an option you're being offered. Yeah.
And it's worth knowing that upfront, folks, because that's what the judges will be thinking. So those are the definitive answers. There aren't any more questions. I think it's probably wise to start thinking about wrapping up. I would always encourage, if you've entered the awards and you're shortlisted, go to the event. Meet us, because we'll be sat on our own otherwise. What's a good reason to go to the event? Why do you think an entrant who's been shortlisted should be there?
To be celebrated, to be absolutely celebrated, and to if they've been shortlisted, they should be making the most of it. Just use it as an opportunity to celebrate with their team. The fact that they're actually there, that they've been shortlisted in a prestigious industry event by an audience, a group of their peers, and have a great time as well. So,
I mean, most people in the industry are very busy. They hardly kind of come up for air, right? So taking the opportunity to kind of get out the house, get dressed up, again, I usually kind of take my wife. It's a great event to kind of, take people that you work with or people that you live with who appreciate what you do, right, to go and celebrate. And, again, I don't think I've ever been to a Don't Panic live event that has been amazing, both in terms of who wins the awards, but the food, the kind of the entertainment, the after party. I mean, it's all just a kind of great thing to kind of be involved in.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Okay. Well, thanks for that, folks. I think we've got some really good insights there. All the secrets are out now. I hope that means that we're going to have a great time judging. For those of you entering, remember, all of the judges do this independently. They aren't affected by anyone else. We usually have to do it on a Sunday afternoon. So make these brilliant entries because we're inevitably starting off grumpy. So, that's what we're looking for. And hopefully we're going to see a pile of these people at the Search Awards themselves. So Dawn, Jim and Neville, thanks very much for joining me today. And
Thank you.
We're going to see everyone at an award soon. Take care, everyone.